I just run past camera. We got the shot. It's in the movie. That profile shot, both those shots are in the movie.
For most of her life, she said nothing. No interviews, no public accusations, no headlines speaking in her own words. But recently, Tom Cruise's daughter made a series of quiet choices that many believe did exactly that. She exposed him without ever saying his name. Join us as we break down just how she exposed him. A birth defined by control. Suri Cruise's story, in many ways, starts before she ever took her first breath. She was born on April 18, 2006, and even the way she entered the world was shaped by rules that weren't really about her or her mother. The idea of a silent birth comes from Scientology teaching that a mother should not cry out, scream, or speak during labor. The belief is that noise and strong emotion could be harmful to the baby's first moments. In practice, that kind of rule can change the whole mood of a delivery room. Birth is usually loud, intense, and full of support and reassurance. A silent birth pushes the opposite: quiet, restraint, and strict control over what a mother is allowed to express. For Katie Holmes, that kind of setting could feel less like comfort and more like pressure. Even if she agreed to parts of Tom Cruise's world at the time, the point here is that the rules did not start with her personal needs as a woman giving birth. They started with an ideology. When someone is in pain and fear, being told to stay silent is not a small request. It can make the experience more isolating. It can also create a situation where other people in the room are not just there to help, but to watch and make sure the rules are followed. That matters, because birth is supposed to center the mother and baby. If the focus becomes following the doctrine, the mother's choices can shrink in real time. This is where the difference between Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes becomes important. In the story you're building, Tom sees this as devotion, proof that the family is committed, disciplined, and loyal. That framing makes the silence sound like something noble, but Katie's side of it reads differently. For her, the same silence becomes survival, something you do to get through a moment where you may not feel fully in charge of your own body, your own space, or your own voice. The same event can look completely different depending on who holds the power, who set the rules, and who has to follow them. There's also a psychological message in a beginning like this. When a child's first hours are surrounded by control, it sets a tone. It suggests that personal feelings come second to the system. It suggests that what's allowed matters more than what's real. Suri obviously would not remember the room itself as a baby, but the meaning of that moment carries forward through the family dynamic that comes next. If the first major event in her life is shaped by strict expectations, it's not a stretch to see how those expectations could continue to shape everything after: where she goes, who surrounds her, what she's told, and what she's kept away from. This is also the first clear sign of how ideology entered Suri's life before she could speak. It wasn't something she chose, questioned, or understood. It was already there, like a set of rules written into the environment around her. And that's the heart of the theme. A child born into a world that already had a script, with adults and institutions ready to define what her life would look like. And once you see how her story begins, the next part, how that control followed her into childhood, gets even harder to ignore. The perfect illusion. From the outside, Suri's early childhood looked like a dream carefully put together for cameras. There were red carpets, bright flashes, and photos that showed smiling parents holding hands with their daughter. Magazine covers framed the family as polished, loving, and unshakable. Every public appearance seemed designed to send one clear message: this was a perfect Hollywood family. For many people watching, there was no reason to doubt it. The images were everywhere, and they were consistent. Happiness, success, and unity were always on display. But behind that public image, there were signs that the reality inside the home was far more controlled. Multiple reports over the years described a constant presence of Scientology associates around the family. These were not casual visitors or ordinary staff. According to people close to the situation, they were individuals connected to the church who were often nearby, observing, accompanying, and sometimes directing daily life. Their presence was quiet, but it was noticeable to those paying attention. The home did not feel private in the way most families expect it to be. For Katie Holmes, this environment slowly led to isolation. Friends noticed she rarely went places alone. Decisions that might seem small, like where to go, who to meet, and how long to stay, appeared to involve other people's input. Over time, that kind of oversight can wear someone down. Autonomy fades, not all at once, but in pieces. The more controlled the environment becomes, the harder it is to tell where personal choice ends and obligation begins. Katie's world began to shrink, even as her public image stayed large and glamorous. This change did not go unnoticed by her parents and close friends. People who knew Katie before her marriage saw a difference in her energy and behavior. They worried about how closely monitored she seemed and how little space she appeared to have for herself. Their concern wasn't dramatic or loud, but it was persistent. When family members feel the need to quietly check in more often, it usually means something feels off, even if no one is saying it out loud. This is how power structures often work inside celebrity households. They don't always rely on force or open conflict. Instead, they operate through access, influence, and constant presence. Fame adds another layer, because privacy is already limited. When control blends into daily routine, it can be difficult for outsiders to point to a single moment and say, "This is where things went wrong." Everything looks normal on the surface, especially when the people involved are powerful and protected by status. Suri, during these years, was too young to understand any of this. What she experienced was simple and emotional. She knew love, attention, and the comfort of familiar routines. She didn't see surveillance or control. She saw parents, caregivers, and a structured world that felt normal to her because it was all she knew. Meanwhile, the adults around her saw more than they could safely explain. They noticed tension, restriction, and silence, but they often kept those observations to themselves. That gap between what Suri lived and what adults quietly recognized matters. It shows how a child can grow up inside a system without knowing it exists, while others watch and worry from the edges. And as that quiet pressure kept building, something was already moving behind the scenes that would soon change everything. A father's absence. In June 2012, everything changed without warning. Just days before his 50th birthday, Tom Cruise learned that Katie Holmes had filed for divorce. The speed of it shocked the public. One moment, the family appeared stable and united. The next, it was over. For adults watching from the outside, it was a headline. For a 6-year-old child, it was something much harder to understand. It was the sudden removal of someone central to her daily life. At 6 years old, children don't process divorce the way adults do. They don't think in terms of legal filings or long-term conflict. They understand life through routine. Who wakes them up? Who walks beside them? Who is there when they fall asleep? When Tom's presence suddenly stopped being part of Suri's everyday world, there was no clear explanation she could fully grasp. There wasn't a calm conversation that made sense at her level. One day, her father was there. Then, he wasn't. What made it harder was the lack of transition. There was no visible goodbye, no gradual change, and no easing into a new normal. Silence replaced routine. The sound of footsteps in the house disappeared. Phone calls didn't become a new habit. Visits didn't fill the space that was left behind. For a child, that kind of sudden quiet can feel confusing and unsettling. Children often look for patterns to feel safe, and when those patterns break without explanation, they don't know where to place the feeling. This kind of absence doesn't need to be described with anger or blame to be emotionally real. Abandonment, especially in childhood, is often quiet. It's not always about harsh words or dramatic exits. Sometimes, it's about someone no longer showing up. The emotional weight comes from the gap, not from a single bad moment. In Suri's case, the absence wasn't paired with a clear reason she could understand, which made it harder to process. Children also tend to turn unanswered questions inward. When a parent disappears from daily life, kids often ask themselves things they don't say out loud. Did I do something wrong? Was I not good enough? Even when adults know the separation isn't the child's fault, children don't automatically feel that truth. They feel the loss first. They feel the silence. And then they try to make sense of it using the limited tools they have at that age. At 6, Suri didn't have access to the larger story. She didn't know about custody agreements, belief systems, or long-standing tensions. All she knew was that someone important was gone. And when that absence stretched from days into months and months into years, it slowly became part of her reality. The shock of June 2012 didn't fade. It settled, and as the days kept moving forward without him, the real question quietly shifted from where did he go to why didn't he come back? The escape plan. What many people missed in June 2012 is that the divorce didn't look like a sudden decision to Katie Holmes. It looked like the final step in a plan she had been building quietly. The public saw a fast split, but the way it happened suggests something more careful and more protective. When you read the details people have reported over the years, it comes across like planning done with military-level precision, meaning every move was timed to reduce risk and keep control in her hands. One of the most talked about parts of this period is the claim that Katie changed phones often and became extremely careful about who had access to her. In normal life, that might sound like paranoia, but in situations where a person believes they're being watched or reported on, those actions can come from lived fear instead of imagination. Reports and long-running rumors described her avoiding certain spaces in the home, questioning whether conversations were private, and replacing staff she didn't trust. Whether every detail is fully proven or not, the bigger point is clear. She acted like someone who felt she could not simply talk it out and safely leave. She acted like someone who believed she needed an exit strategy. Replacing staff is especially telling because it's not a small or casual thing to do. It can create tension, raise questions, and alert the people around you that you are changing the rules. But if Katie believed information was being passed back to someone else, changing staff could have been a way to protect her plans, her privacy, and her custody position. That is why this period is often described as a quiet war. Not because there were public battles at first, but because the real fight was happening behind closed doors, in choices that were meant to keep her daughter close and safe. New York wasn't just a new address. It was a key part of the strategy. Katie reportedly chose New York for both legal and emotional reasons. Legally, New York could support stability for a child who is already living there and attending school there. Psychologically, New York also offered distance from the social and professional networks in Los Angeles that could make a private separation harder. Distance matters in custody fights. It can change routines, limit access, and create a new normal that courts may be reluctant to disrupt. For a parent focused on protecting a child's day-to-day life, that stability can be everything. Timing also mattered. Reports say Katie filed while Tom Cruise was abroad filming Oblivion. That choice would not be random. If your goal is to avoid confrontation, avoid pressure, and avoid last-minute moves that could change custody outcomes, then filing while the other parent is far away can reduce immediate conflict. It also prevents a situation where plans are discovered early and blocked. Then there's the risk calculus. Katie's choice likely meant risking career opportunities, losing privacy, and taking on intense media attention. It also meant stepping into a fight with a powerful public figure, and all the attention that comes with that. But if her main goal was custody and freedom to raise her daughter outside a system she feared, those risks could seem worth it. This is why the move doesn't read as impulsive. It reads as defensive. It reads like a parent making hard choices, because she believed the alternative could cost her the thing she cared about most. And once the escape worked, the next chapter wasn't peace. It was learning how to live with the silence that followed. Custody and control. One of the most striking details in Katie Holmes and Tom Cruise's divorce is how quickly it was resolved. Just 11 days after the filing in June 2012, the custody agreement was finalized. In Hollywood divorces, especially ones involving power, money, and a child, this kind of speed is rare. To many observers, it suggested that something very specific mattered more than dragging out a public fight. The terms were clear: Katie received full custody of Suri, while Tom agreed to significant financial support. The reported child support amount, around $400,000 a year, along with medical and educational costs, made headlines. But money was never the heart of the issue. Katie Holmes already had her own career and financial independence. What she was fighting for wasn't financial security. It was control over how her daughter would be raised. Custody meant daily decisions, values, routines, and influence. For Katie, that mattered far more than any settlement figure. Over the years, former members of Scientology have shared testimonies about how the organization operates, especially when it comes to families. While not all claims can be independently verified, many former members have described strict expectations around loyalty and separation from those considered outside the church. These accounts became part of the public conversation surrounding the divorce, especially when people tried to understand why Katie acted with such urgency and caution. At the center of her fear, according to those familiar with the situation, was the Sea Org, Scientology's elite inner organization. The Sea Org requires extreme commitment, long working hours, and strict discipline. Former members have said it is not a place they believe children should ever be pressured into. For Katie, the idea that Suri could one day be drawn toward that system appears to have been a clear boundary. It represented a line she was not willing to let anyone cross, no matter the cost. Another key concept that comes up in former member accounts is the idea of being outside. People who leave or refuse involvement can reportedly become distant or cut off. This idea matters because Suri was being raised outside Scientology after the divorce. Even if she was never an active participant, her status alone could create distance. Separation doesn't always come from anger. Sometimes it comes from rules that quietly dictate who is allowed to stay close and who is not. In this situation, Suri was never an active decision-maker. She wasn't choosing sides or belief systems. She was a child caught between adult structures that were far bigger than her. That's why many people describe her as collateral rather than a participant. Decisions about her life were being made to protect her, but also because of conflicts she didn't create and couldn't understand at the time. The speed of the custody agreement, the focus on full control rather than money, and the fear surrounding certain institutions all point to the same thing. This wasn't about winning a public battle. It was about drawing a firm boundary around a child's future and making sure that boundary held. And once that boundary was set, Suri had to grow up learning what it meant to live on the other side of it. A father on screen. After the move to New York, Suri's life settled into a routine that looked calm on the surface. She went to school, had activities, and spent most of her time with her mother. But there was one constant that never stopped feeling strange. Her father was still everywhere, just not with her. Tom Cruise's face was on posters, movie covers, and billboards. His movies played in theaters, his interviews ran on TV, and people talked about his stunts like they were world news. So Suri wasn't growing up with a father who disappeared from the world. She was growing up with a father who stayed famous, visible, and celebrated while staying absent from her daily life. That kind of situation creates a specific kind of confusion. Most kids who don't see a parent often can at least separate the parent from everyday life. But Suri couldn't. She could walk down a street and see his face on a bus stop aid. She could pass a bookstore and see his name on a magazine cover. She could hear classmates or strangers mention him. The reminders were constant. It's hard to move on from someone when the world keeps placing them in front of you, like they're still present. Over time, the emptiness shows up in moments that other people might not notice. Birthdays are a big one. Kids remember who calls, who shows up, who sends a message, and who asks how school is going. In Suri's case, the story being told is that birthdays and milestones passed with little to no contact. That doesn't just feel like a missed event. It can feel like being forgotten. And for a child, that feeling can grow quietly year after year. Media reports after 2013 often suggested that Tom's contact with Suri was minimal or not clearly confirmed. Even if the full truth is private, what matters for Suri's experience is how it looked and felt from her side. Long stretches with no visible support, no public signs of connection, and no steady pattern of involvement that she could count on. The uncertainty itself becomes painful because a child can't plan around maybe. As she got older, comparisons became harder to avoid. She would see friends being picked up by their dads after school, practice, or performances. She would hear other kids talk about weekend visits, father-daughter traditions, or simple daily help with homework. Those aren't dramatic moments, but they shape a child's sense of being cared for. When you don't have that, you notice. And you may pretend you don't, because it's easier than explaining it. This is also where early independence can form. Not the fun kind of independence, but the kind built from necessity. Suri learned to keep going without expecting someone to show up. She learned to manage disappointment quietly. She learned to rely on herself in small ways that many kids her age don't have to. That can build strength, but it can also build distance inside a person. You stop asking because asking hurts. And then there's the difference between being busy and choosing not to. At first, kids can accept the idea that a parent is working, but as years pass, that explanation stops fitting. People who want to stay connected find ways to do it, even with packed schedules. A call takes minutes. A message takes seconds. A child eventually learns that time is not the only issue. Choice is. And once that lesson sinks in, the next step is even heavier, with Suri starting to search for the real reasons behind the silence. Learning the truth. By the time Suri reached her early teens, she was old enough to sense that there were parts of her story no one had fully explained to her. Adults around her were careful with their words. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Questions were answered softly or redirected. For years, she lived with fragments instead of full answers. Then the pandemic happened, and everything slowed down. Schools closed, routines changed, and suddenly there was a lot of quiet time. That isolation became a turning point. With fewer distractions and more time alone, questions she had pushed aside started to come forward. Like many teenagers, Suri turned to the internet to understand the world around her. She began reading old interviews, watching documentaries, and looking up information that had always felt just out of reach. She didn't search for drama, she searched for clarity. Piece by piece, she started seeing patterns that helped explain things she had felt for years, but never understood. The silence, the distance, the absence that had followed her since she was 6. Through that research, she likely came across discussions about Scientology and how the organization views relationships with people who are not involved. Former members have spoken publicly for years about a concept known as disconnection. According to these accounts, individuals can be encouraged or required to distance themselves from people considered outside, especially if those relationships are seen as a threat to belief or loyalty. For a teenager trying to understand why a parent stayed away, this information can land heavily. This is where the truth becomes complicated. Understanding that her father's absence might not have been driven by lack of love alone doesn't erase the absence itself. Knowing there may have been rules, pressure, or belief systems involved can explain behavior, but it doesn't undo years of missed birthdays or unanswered questions. Realizing something wasn't personal can coexist with deep pain. Both things can be true at the same time. For a long time, hope can quietly survive. Hope that one day things will change. Hope that someone will show up, explain, or reconnect. But learning more about the systems involved can force a shift. The hope doesn't disappear all at once. It weakens. It becomes harder to hold on to. Acceptance doesn't come with relief at first. It often comes with grief. Grief for what could have been, and grief for the version of the future that no longer feels realistic. This is the emotional break between waiting and letting go. It's the moment when a child, now older, realizes they've been standing still emotionally for years. Not because they wanted to, but because they were holding space for someone else's return. When that return keeps not happening, the waiting itself becomes painful. It drains energy. It shapes decisions. And eventually, it has to stop. For Suri, this meant understanding that her life could not stay paused in expectation. She didn't stop caring. She stopped waiting. The silence didn't suddenly make sense, but it became clearer. And with that clarity came a quiet decision to move forward without needing answers that might never come. And once that shift happened, the next step was no longer about understanding the past. It was about deciding who she wanted to be next. The name change. Turning 18 can be a big deal for anyone, but for Suri, it wasn't just a legal moment. It was a psychological turning point. When you're a child, adults decide almost everything around you: where you live, what your name is, what gets kept private, and what story gets told to the public. Even if you have strong feelings, you often don't have the power to act on them. But adulthood changes that. At 18, Suri could finally make choices that were fully hers, not filtered through custody rules, family pressure, or public expectation. In the period leading up to that birthday in April 2024, the story describes Suri working on college application essays. That matters because essays are one of the first places many young people tell the truth about themselves without editing it for family or friends. It's not a press interview. It's not a staged photo moment. It's private writing meant to explain who you are and what you've survived. For someone who grew up with long silence around a missing parent, that kind of writing can bring buried feelings to the surface. It can also feel scary, because putting pain into words makes it real. The quote, "Sometimes we don't grow up with love. We grow up with the space that love leaves behind," works as a clear self-definition. It doesn't call anyone evil. It doesn't shout. It doesn't even need to name her father. It simply tells the truth of what absence feels like when it lasts for years. It says she didn't just lose moments. She grew up shaped by what wasn't there. And by writing that, she took control of the story in a way she couldn't as a child. Then comes the reported name change. On May 17, 2024, she becomes Suri Noel Holmes, choosing her mother's middle name as part of her own identity. Whether people see a name as a small thing or a huge thing, it carries meaning. It's what teachers say on the first day of class. It's what appears on forms, certificates, and programs. It's how the world addresses you. If Suri felt her last name tied her to pain, pressure, or expectations she never asked for, changing it could feel like setting down a weight she had carried for years. This is also why the name change can be understood as relief, not rebellion. Rebellion is often about proving a point to someone else. Relief is about finally doing something for yourself. In this story, the choice isn't framed as a public attack on Tom Cruise. It's framed as a private decision to stop being defined by his absence. It's saying, "I'm not going to keep living as a symbol of someone else's choices. I'm going to be myself, even if people talk." And people did talk. Public reaction tends to be loud and simplified. Some people label it drama. Some call it revenge. Others treat it like celebrity gossip. But private meaning is usually quieter and deeper. For Suri, it's presented as a way to claim her own identity, protect her peace, and step into adulthood without waiting for permission. And once she makes that choice, the next part gets even more real. What it looks like to build a normal life when the whole world still remembers your last name. A life without his shadow. After the name change, the next big moment was when it became visible in everyday life, not just in paperwork. High school graduation is one of those moments where your identity is printed, spoken, and shared in public. In the account you're working from, Suri's new name appeared in the graduation program. That matters because it's not a rumor or a headline. It's the kind of detail that shows a decision has become real in her day-to-day world. For someone who spent years living under a famous last name, seeing a different name in a formal school setting can feel like a clean reset. It's also a clear signal to the people around her that she wants to be recognized on her own terms. Around the same time, she was also building confidence in her own voice through performance. Being in the Addams Family musical is more than just a school activity. Performing means showing up, practicing, taking criticism, and learning how to be seen without hiding. For a teenager who grew up under public attention but without control over the story, performance can be one place where she decides how she is viewed. On stage, she isn't someone's daughter. She's a cast member doing her job. That shift can be empowering. It also shows she was developing a life that wasn't centered on family drama or media narratives. Then comes college, which is often the biggest step into independence. In the story you shared, she was accepted into Carnegie Mellon University and began studying fashion. That choice says a lot. Fashion is creative, practical, and demanding. It requires long hours, attention to detail, and personal style. It also offers a clear path to building an identity that doesn't rely on a famous family connection. College life is full of basic routines, classes, deadlines, dorm life, and group work. And those routines can be healing because they are normal. Being surrounded by other students who are focused on their own dreams can help a person feel less like a public symbol and more like a regular young adult. Living between New York and Pittsburgh adds another layer. New York is tied to her childhood after the divorce and to her mother's steady protection. Pittsburgh represents a new chapter, a campus where most people are too busy to treat her like a celebrity story. Moving between the two cities can help her balance comfort and growth. She can keep close ties to her home life while still building independence in a new place. Through all of this, Katie Holmes remains a constant presence in the background of the story, not in a spotlight-stealing way, but as someone steady, helping with moves, showing up for visits, and staying involved without controlling every step. That kind of support matters because it gives Suri a base. It also shows the difference between being absent and being consistently present over time. None of this is closure in a neat, movie-style way. It's something more realistic, movement forward. It's choosing school, creative work, routines, and a name that feels right. It's building a life where the loud parts of the past don't have to control the future. And just when it seems like she's finally living quietly, the next twist is how the public reacts when she stops playing the role they expect. If you liked this video, hit like, subscribe for more stories like this, and let us know in the comments what part stayed with you the most.